They're all of them. Have all of them.
Know that.
Yeah, that's an idea. Okay, what I wanted to talk to you about today was about what we can do for the native bees. Now, we're not going to be talking about honeybees. Somebody said a comment that, oh, I don't have any honeybees around. Well, I don't care if you have honeybees around. What I'm concerned about right now on this is the native bees. People don't realize honeybees. A lot of times people don't even realize that honeybees are not native. Honeybees came over 400 years ago from Europe. They were brought on purpose to pollinate their product, the foods that the pioneers, the early people, settlers needed to use. When they told me they weren't native, I said, well, wait a minute. I remember seeing pictures, movies when I was a little girl of the native people out in the woods getting honey out of a tree, or a bear getting honey in the wild. Well, how could that be? Well, the bees escaped. We know how swarms will escape, and they go ahead and they went ahead and moved west. They made it all the way to the Rocky Mountains. They couldn't get over the Rocky Mountains. That was interesting to me too. The honeybees that came to California came in through either from Mexico, that route up, or came by ship, like the original ones that came on the East Coast. But honeybees are technically the only real big producer of honey of all the bees. No other bees produce honey. Our native bees, that's not what they're for. They're not for making honey. So we're going to be talking about the native bees. We're going to be talking about social versus solitary bees. Social bees, there's only two kinds of social bees here in Texas. The honeybee, which is not native, and the bumblebees. Bumblebees, social means, of course, they have a hive. Honeybees, they can be 80,000 bees in a hive. With bumblebees, 50 to 200 is more normal, but that's their social. Now, social bees protect their hive. They protect their babies. They protect their eggs. So they are the ones that are most likely to sting. All the rest of the bees, all the rest of the native bees are solitary bees, which means each female lays her own eggs, makes her own nest, lays her own eggs. She does not protect her nest after she's done. Once she's done, she's done. She leaves that, and so she doesn't protect it. If she's not protecting those babies, those eggs or babies, then she's not going to be stinging. So, and besides that, the male bees don't have a stinger. So people that are worried about being stung if they attract the native bees, bumblebees are the only ones you really need to worry about. Buzz and non-buzz pollinators. I had no concept of buzz pollination, but in the Americas, a lot of our plants developed with they hold on to their pollen tighter than the pollen from Europe or South America. They hold on to the pollen fairly tight. In order to get that pollen to loosen up and let the anthers let it go, they have to do what's called buzz pollination or sonification. They wiggle their wings, and it's not actually wiggling their wings, it's the wing muscles at the top of their thorax. They shake, and that shaking will release the pollen. And that brings us to the neat versus messy. Honeybees are very neat. You know how they tuck all their pollen into those little baskets on each side. They're very careful to tuck it all in. If that pollen is all tucked in like that, it's less likely to be able to pollinate the next plant, the next flower that they come to. So if they're more of a messy pollinator, then when they go from this rose, no, I don't want roses, although roses are native. Some, very few. But if they go from one plant to the next plant, if it's the same kind of plant, then they can spread the pollen. If they're going to something different, then it's not going to do any good at all. So we have our neat pollinators that have it all stuffed in here, and it's not available to spread to the next plant. We have our messy pollinators. which have gone like with buzz pollination. With buzz pollination, they go in and they shake, and the plant will actually shoot out that pollen. A lot of plants just shoot it out, so it's all over them, and you'll see those really looking messy, yellow all over their heads and all over their bodies. So when they get to the next plant, they've got lots of pollen to pollinate that next plant. So it's really, it's made for the plants that grew native in North America or in the Americas.
Are you still talking about bees doing this?
Yes.
You said bugs, but
No,
bees.
bees. Buzz.
Oh, bugs.
Buzz pollination. And when they buzz pollinate. So the next thing is we have generalists and specialists. Honeybees are generalists. That means they will go to anything and collect pollen. They will eat any kind of pollen. Specialist bees only eat the same genus, one genus. So if they're the blueberry bees, they will only eat blueberry pollen, and that's all that they can feed their babies, their eggs or their larvae. They're a sunflower bee. The only thing they can go to, they can only get pollen. That's the only thing they can eat is sunflower pollen. There's several reasons that this can be a problem, because if we don't have any of those flowers, then we don't have that bee. And if it's, so if we've killed all that particular plant off, we lose that whole insect. But the other part of that about being generalists or specialists, if they're generalists and they're going to everything, then of course they're pollinating, the pollen they take from the lantana to the echinacea to the whatever, that's not going to do any good because for the plant, because it doesn't pollinate the plant. But if they're a specialist and they only go to spring beauty flowers, they go from spring beauty flower to spring beauty flower to spring beauty flower, or blueberry to blueberry to blueberry, they're going to be a much more effective pollinator because they've already got the right kind of pollen to take care of that plant. Did we all know these things? I didn't. This is new to me. Well, new in the last.
So can you tell? I'm sorry, I'm going to ask stupid questions.
I know you.
If you don't know it, you ask. Okay, so you can't tell the difference from these bees. If you're looking at these bees, can you tell a generalist from a specialist?
Oh, yes, I can, because the only generalists we have in the bee population. Oh, no, I shouldn't have said that. No, you have to know these things. And I've been participating in a lot of sites where they post pictures, and I can see the picture and I can see what it is and how it looks. And the male has a little light spot between its eyes, and you can tell the male from the female. So you learn it. It's just like learning the breeds of dogs. Eventually you do. Yes, sir.
So,
I'm sorry.
Are there's both generalists and specialists within the same group of bees?
No. Yes.
What about the specialists? Are there specialists for different plants within that group, or are they all the same plant?
Yeah. That's an interesting question. Genus. The way that I understand it, they go by genus. So if there is with the sunflowers, they can have any pollen in that genus. They may have one that they prefer, but they can eat the pollen from another in the same genus. Did that answer that question?
Linda, what is a honeybee, specialist or general?
Generalist. Which is the reason. What was let's see. Sensitive and less sensitive to weather, because you know how honeybees have to be protected in the wintertime. They have to have the extra honey. They do a good job of cooling their hives and warming their hives themselves, but they are weather sensitive. Many of our native bees do not live. They have a full life cycle in 1 year. So what they're actually during the wintertime, they're actually living the winter as a pupa, which would be kind of like a cocoon. So they've hatched out of their egg, they've turned into a larva, they've eaten their they're bee bred and then they turned into a pupa, they spent the winter. The adult can only be alive as long as she has pollen for her particular, if she's a specialist. She can only be alive as long as there are flowers blooming that is in her specialist genus. So if the blueberries are up, a blueberry bee is only going to be alive from around here, about February to May, that they're actually blooming. They're by May, we're already turning into berries, so there's no flowers left, or very few. So the adult bee is only alive that long. 2 or 3 months, a lot of bees are only alive for 2 or 3 months as adults. The rest of the year they spend as an egg, a larva, or a pupa. Okay. I thought the information on the bottom of that was kind of interesting about the one native bee can pollinate 12 pounds of cherries versus 60 honeybees to do the same job. I thought that was kind of interesting, and I have this picture in my head of, what would that be, 61 people wandering around this row, following their particular little bee to make sure that they're, to see how many flowers it pollinates. I don't know how they get this information, but they do a lot of work to research and prove what they're talking about here. Okay, so this is the information that we probably learned in elementary school, that between 80 and 85% of all plants need pollinators to reproduce. And you notice that most of those top things, those top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, they pertain to people, what people need to from bees. But that last one is about our environment. It's about the native plants and animals. They rely on bees as much as we do, or more. Okay. One of the biggest bee challenges is lack of habitat. They're losing their habitat. On my street, it's not a long street, maybe 2 miles long. That county road is only about 2 miles long. They're putting in about 40 new houses at one end and about 12 new houses at the other end. That's a lot of land that's not going to be there for any of the insects anymore. Not just any bees that might have lived there, but there's no insects, no critters. It's going to affect them all, and that's what's happening. There's actually a 1-to-1 ratio with the amount of land that we take over, or that habitat that's lost, and the amount of species that are lost, both plants and animals, I'm not just talking bees in this case, but it's overall in general. We know on the bigger mammals how much of a problem it is when you have this very separated habitats. They have trouble getting through. Well, bees don't have quite as much trouble. A honeybee will, not a honeybee we know will travel a pretty good distance for pollen, but most native bees will not go more than 2 miles. It's actually less than 2 miles, and some of them just a very tiny part of a mile is all that they can cover. So they have to have whatever it is that they need close to them. So what we can do to help with the ground nesters, they need some bare soil. As a master gardener, what do we learn? Compost, 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 mulch, mulch, mulch. Well, guess what? Mulch is not necessarily the best thing for our insects, for our ground-dwelling bees. The ground-dwelling bees can't get through that heavy-duty stuff. If we put black plastic down and we put a lot of 4 inches worth of mulch on top of it, we're not going to get the bees. The bees can't get through it. Yes.
So the insect boxes that you can build that the bees will use for the non-ground nesters, Can you build an artificial
Oh, yeah.
ground nest?
Oh. Build an
Box.
artificial what?
Nest, a box for the ground nesters?
No.
Do that, okay.
What, how interesting. Actually, I have seen one. What they did, now that you mention it, I realize they had a sandbox. It was like a sandbox that they had the ground, the wood nesters, the carpenter bee holes. They had that on each side. In the middle, they had a sandbox. And they had left it bare. I don't know what kind of soil exactly they used, but I have seen it done. So, but what they're suggesting is just, right alongside the edge of the fence line, keep it cleaned off of grasses just a little bit. We did a bunch of weed eating recently. My granddaughter came to visit and I put her to work. We weed eated this area that was quite overgrown. Well, I was really surprised when we got it all done. There's bare spots between, I was using a northern sea oats. So there was bunch grasses. And between those bunch grasses, there was lots of bare soil in there. So you will have, if you're using bunch grasses and not the centipede type or the Bermuda type, there you can have spots. But what was suggested that I saw was, like I said, have it pull back from your fence line or at the base of trees, someplace where you can leave the soil bare. And if you're thinking about it, then it's more likely that you'll be aware of these things and try to help them. Yeah, try using the newspaper. And some ground nesting bees like to hide their holes under leaf litter. I had her spread some leaf litter in those areas where we cleaned up. So that there is, because the leaf litter is not the same as mulch. Leaf litter is much lighter and they can get underneath there and use those. So leaf litter is different.
What about pine needles?
I don't see why not. I would think it'd be fine. Especially around here, that's what we're used to.
Did you say?
Pine
Pine
needles.
needles. I have a forest behind me, so.
Okay, another challenge, lack of plant diversity. And that's what we're all about, is trying to use more of the native plants. 25 to 50% of native bees are plant specialists. And we've talked about, they have to have that pollen in order to live. They have to have that pollen to feed their babies. When they, after these solitary bees will lay their eggs, then they make this little bee bread out of pollen and nectar. And by the way, adult bees are not limited on the nectar. They can eat any kind of nectar. It's only the pollen they're limited on. But they will mix the pollen and the nectar into these little loaves, tiny little loaves of bee bread, and put it right there where when the egg hatches out and turns into a larva, it will eat the larva will eat the bee bread, and then it will pupate, and that's three-fourths of the life cycle. Native specialist bees need the species of plant they specialize in, of course. This part is something I was just made aware of. All native plants are not created equal. Oh, by the way, that is a spring beauty bee. And the pollen is pink. It's the prettiest thing. This is the first year I've actually seen one myself. I did not get a picture, as you can see. But it's, y'all know what the spring beauty flower is? That early spring, March, April, probably May is the end of the time. So that's all the longer that the adult lives. March, April, May. But now back to all native plants are not created equal. George Talamy started studying insects and birds. Really, it was the birds, the lack of birds that he realized, wow, we've lost, our numbers have plummeted like 50% in the last, no, that's not right. It's a huge amount in the last 50 years though, of the terrestrial birds, the land birds. The numbers have plummeted. Why did they plummet? Because they don't have any food. Why don't they have any food? Because we've been killing all the insects. And when you think of a caterpillar, don't think of something that's eating your plants. Think of some baby food, soft, baby food. So many, this is another one where I'd like to have been in on the study. A pair of chickadees, it takes 5 to 6,000 caterpillars to raise a clutch of eggs, which is normally about 4 or 5 eggs, from hatch to fledge. From the time they hatch out of the egg to the time they fledge, takes 5 to 6,000. Now, who sat there for that whole, 18 days or 3 weeks and counted how many mom and dad, and they even knew every 6 minutes they're coming with another one. It was really interesting to me. But they called, he realized in all these studies that there are some plants that are more important to the environment in general than other plants. The biggest one was oak trees. In every area, oak trees are one of the biggest ones because they support so many insects. Now, does that bother us that my oak tree is covered with insects that I don't even know are there? No. But that's really important to the birds. He did this with the keystone plants. He calls keystone plants are the plants that support the most. Well, it's keystone plants, native, critical food. Okay. So what he came up with is they divided the country into ecoregions, and we are. A lot of you, maybe Melina, you're probably in ecoregion 8, which would be what we call the piney woods. I'm over here on this side, and I'm the post oak savanna. So I'm ecoregion 9. He has lists on at that website, and that's I really like that website. He has lists of the plants that are the most important, the top trees, the top shrubs, the top flowering perennials for both butterflies and for bees. Now, I did this one just to show, because we are talking about bees today, just to show on the specialist bees that rely on these plants. And I just picked out ones that I see all the time, that we have all around us. Verbicina, that golden crown here, it's also that's also the genus for frostweed. I didn't even know that was a native plant until just a couple of years ago. And now I find out it's way high up on the really good stuff. I mean, sunflower, goldenrod, aster, those all made sense to me. Black-eyed Susan, you know something that's not clear up there? Think echinacea. Echinacea only supports about 6 or 8 different kinds of bee specialists. No lantana on the top 30 at all. They only put the top 30. It doesn't mean, but what that means is that's the ones that are for the generalists, and they always will support for nectar purposes. They are important for nectaring.
Flea bane.
So it's that tiny little white flower. It looks like a daisy, only it's tiny, about the size of less than a dime. It's really little, like the size of the yellow center. The petals are like French.
Is it growing on the ground? Or
No, they're tall. They usually grow up here like this. And when you grow them, you will think, oh, that's a weed. It's still got some bloom. But yeah, it's still blooming right now. I may have some pictures eventually. So to make you aware, these are really good website, really good choice so that you can choose plants, and something that I was not aware of, that all natives are not created equal.
While you're on the topic of Doug Tallamy, can I add a little something to that?
Yeah.
So he has a program called Homegrown National Park. And so you can Google that. It's got a ton of his information in there. And then he's got a fabulous book. There's 2 books. Bringing Nature Home and Nature's Best Home are 2 fabulous books about what you and I can do with what we have to support nature better. And it's just fabulous information.
It was such a wake up to me. Why are non-native plants? Why do we grow so many non-native plants? Why did we as gardeners like them? Had we in the past as gardeners like them? Well, because the bugs don't eat them. Because the bugs don't eat them because they don't recognize them as food. So of course they're good plants, but it's not good for the environment. And that's the other thing I'm moving to, rather than being most worried about what is it good for me what does it do for me? What does it do for people? More, does it do for the rest of the environment, for the whole thing, not just me. I'm just a little piece of it. I was shocked about a year ago, just about a year ago. My sister and I were down at the Lady Bird Johnson wildfire gardens. And I was going on and on about the natives plants, and I really love the native plants. And and she said she's a California girl, born and bred. No, she's not. Wasn't born and bred. She married there and she's lived there. She was all upset that they were pulling all the ice plant out and replacing them with these other natives. And I explained to her that ice plant does not a thing for anything. It just looks pretty. It'll hold the land. It does hold the land. That's a possible. But that's all that it does. It's not native. It doesn't feed anything. And I went on to the birds, and she loves birds. So that was okay. Now she's understanding that how important the native plants are. But this was an intelligent woman that was upset that they were taking out the ice plant. Okay. So what can we do for bumblebees? Bumblebees need overwintering sites. Oh, this is what made me think of the blue stem. I'm pretty sure this is a broom sedge blue stem. But see how the bottom of it is very thick? When that's a good place for a queen bumblebee to spend the winter. I told you that most bees don't live through the winter. A bumblebee hive doesn't either. Only the new queens live through the winter. She will look for someplace like that thicket of grass, or a rodent den, a burrow between some pieces of wood. She will look for someplace to spend the winter. She will eat right up until it's too cold. Last fall, I saw quite a number. The queen bees are a little larger, about 1.5 times the regular size of a bumblebee. We had bunches of out at the nature preserve at the Wildscape. They're pretty good size bumblebees. And I knew they were the queens because they are so much bigger. But they stay working on, they need the pollen all the way through November or December until it gets really cold, and they start to hibernate. They don't really hibernate all the way through the winter. If we get those nice warm times in February, they'll come out and look for more pollen. So we need plants that bloom from early to late. Red buds, that bloom. Don't just think of flowers. Think of the trees that are possible bloomers. But they need flowers all the way to the end. That is a golden crown beard, that verbena that I was talking about, the yellow flower. It starts blooming in May and blooms all the way into November. Of course, goldenrod, that's another one of those late bloomers. So you need the pollen. Bumblebee queens need the pollen very early, because she's the only one alive when she in the spring. She's the one that's got to start. She's already bred in the fall. She will, when she finds where she's going to make her nest, she has to go out and get enough pollen to make the little bee breads. She has to have enough pollen to feed herself for the couple of weeks it takes to hatch out the next, the start of the next hive. So she needs the pollen from early to late. That's something that we as gardeners can do. Carpenter bees. Carpenter bees, we haven't talked much about. The minor bee, the ones that nest in the ground, those we usually call minor bees or digger bees. But the carpenter bees are the ones that dig holes in wood and lay their eggs in the wood. So what we've done out at the nature preserve is we use wood for decorative reasons. Make it kind of a woodsy looking decorative. And if you can see it far back by the fence over the top of the John Deere, there's some wood piled back there. We leave wood piled in a out of the way place that's not going to bother you in your yard, just somewhere clear out there. But leave some wood around for the bees. They like old beetle runs. They will lay a lot of the carpenter bees will lay their eggs in old needle ruts. So for generally, just in general purposes, all native bees need the same things we need. They need the flowering plants, which we have found that native plants are much easier and cheaper to grow because they don't need the water in the hot summers. They don't need to be protected from cold, so they're really easier and cheaper to grow. And they need plants that bloom from early to late. And don't forget the trees. Black cherry is one of them that's very high on the list of things. Now that's actually including caterpillars and butterflies, not just for bees. But they are, and the plums, all the plums are good. They're in the same family with the black cherry. And remember in the fall to leave the leaves. Makes it easier to garden too.
I was just gonna say, I got a whole bunch of leaves from last fall. Now I don't have to worry
So
about it.
that's because you're concerned for the native bees.
Okay, I'll tell my husband that.
So bees need food, water, cover, and a place to raise their young, just like we do. Studies showed that even a little garden, just a couple of pots of native plants can be a help. There are still native bees being discovered, new ones that we didn't know we had in like places like Washington D.C. and New York City. But because they have put rooftop places for the bees, they put in place the little, just people put them on their balconies. We can do. It doesn't matter that we don't have a lot of room. We can help. And that's it. This is what Doug Talmadge suggests. These are the things that he suggests. It's not particularly bees, that's in general what we can do. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
So let's say you plant this selection and none of the bees in the neighborhood like that flower. Do they email the ones that like them to come over?
Okay. If they really are a plant that a local bee needs, they will find it. It doesn't come right away. It may take 5 years, but it will come.
Because if they're only traveling a few miles.
It's a good question. It's a valid question, but they will come.
So carpenter bees, couple of things. I've got 3 holes in a deck cover that they come to every year. It's a bone of contention between myself and my husband because I'm throwing my body in front of them and he wants to kill them. But there are a lot of people now promoting the carpenter bee traps that are with blocks of wood with holes in them, and then it's got a jar usually attached to it, and there's pheromones inside of there. And I have, before I was educated, I tried one, and it kills them because they get into the jar and they can't get out. How, in cases like that, where it's in the structure of our house, I was previously told they don't do much harm. And if this one hadn't expanded from 1 hole to 3 holes, I could argue that, but help me. How can I argue this?
Providing a spot that they can use. And I've heard the same thing that you said now it's up to 3. Well, I haven't heard about it. They keep on growing. You just treated them too nicely.
It is a great place.
But yet, like decks, I've heard people say, okay, I put something on the end of my deck so they can use that and not bother the rest of the deck. Sometimes it's going to take, we are going to have to fight it. We do have to have, we can't save every one of them, but we can do what we can do.
And the ones that are in there now, because she is actively in these holes, will hatch in spring.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I don't know all types of carpenter bees, so I am not going, but I'm going to say that generally, if they lay their eggs now, it's good. That's the start of this, the next, she's not gonna lay three different nests.
It's gonna go all the way to the spring before she hatches.
She's not gonna do anything. She's gonna die. The mother, the female is gonna die. The babies are gonna hatch out. It might be a good idea to not let that hatching happen. To stop the cycle and give them someplace close. Or then let them hatch out, close that off so they can't, and put something else where they can. Close. Same type of wood. I've heard a lot of people doing, they figure out ways to help. We do what we can. We can't save everything. Has anybody else had the worms trying to escape across the concrete recently? We go out on worm rescue every day, and I'm thinking, okay, I can't save them all.
But Linda, you know, I have this big pollinator plant, and last year there were all these bumblebees on it. And this year I've only seen like one or two. Is something happening to the bumblebees?
No, but it could be in your spot. Do you know, have something to put in on that? Oh, no, you were just waiting.
No, I've noticed a decrease in bees this year.
I haven't at my house, but potentially, I mean, it would be like rain. We have years that we have lots and years we don't have as much. It can, the weather can cycle things. It could have been partly because of the weather. We had so much wet. If those bees were trying to nest in the ground, they couldn't nest in the ground. Now it's dried out. Maybe they're going to be later starting than they usually are.
So the bumblebee, does it have the same cycle where they're gonna die off? They don't live through the winter?
Only the queen lives through the winter. All the rest of the bees, all the rest of the hive completely dies. There are no eggs, no nothing. Just the queen lives through. She's already been pollen. She's already, yes. So she's ready to lay
eggs.
Normally she would have started February, March, April. As soon as she could find a nest. If our ground was soaked and she couldn't find a place to nest, she didn't start there. So that's all I'm suggesting. It could be late. Well, thank y'all.
Oh, I got a question. Are wasps and mud daubers considered bees or?
They are
totally
wasps.
different?
I was asked, I'm so proud of myself. The first time I was asked what's the difference between a bee and a wasp, I had no idea. Well, they don't look the same. Wasps are meat eaters, and we know that logically.
Get us.
They eat, they're after the spiders and the other insects, the cicada killer, all these, they eat insects and they feed their babies insects. Now they do nectar. That's why we see them on flowers, but that's the difference between a bee is a pollinator. That's how they get their carbohydrates. Excuse me, they get their protein. Pollen is a protein. Nectar is a carbohydrate. So both of them use nectar, but the wasps get their protein from insects.
Okay, what about mud daubers?
The same. They're really good on spiders. But now that I've been studying insects, spiders are even really good. So, yeah. Yes. But thank y'all. Unplug mine. Oh, no. No, please no.